Cease all hostile engagement and prepare for Battle Royale match transport. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The safe zone has been marked. Please proceed to the designated area on your map. Welcome to the Dome, player. Good luck.
Hey guys, Level Cap here. That's a little clip of my potato aim in Islands of Nyne, a new Battle Royale game coming to Steam in December. This game is currently in alpha, so excuse some of the subpar graphics at the moment. I had to turn most things down to low just to try and get my performance or my FPS running at a state that I was comfortable with. Battle Royale games seem to be all the rage these days, starting off with the H1Z1 King of the Kill. Now we've got PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, Islands of Nyne, and even Amazon is rumored to be working on a new Battle Royale game as well. I'm excited about any future Battle Royale titles. What I like about Islands of Nyne is that it doesn't incorporate a third-person mechanic, which is a nice change of pace. It's first-person only, running on the Unreal 4 engine. The game is designed around various game modes, solos, duos, and then playing in squads of 5. It can, or at least it should be able to support up to 100 players at one time, though I wasn't able to get into any fully populated servers. I think that's in large part due to the fact that it's a limited alpha right now, and there just wasn't a huge amount of people online. I think the most people I got into a game at once was around maybe 24 or 25, and even then the devs have focused so much on the pacing of this game that it really didn't feel too slow. Even with only a fraction of how many players should be in a fully populated server, I was still getting into plenty of firefights and having some fun action. I think the developers want this game to be focused more on the combat rather than the looting system. You still drop into the game without any weapons aside from a knife, which you can either stab people with or you can throw at other players, and I believe it can actually kill them in one hit, which is kind of an interesting dynamic early game. But then you can run around and find weapons pretty quickly. Pistols are good, SMGs are good, shotguns weren't quite as good as I was hoping they would be, but it's not hard to find a decent weapon and engage players right away. Loot spawns on highlighted red containers, so it's pretty easy to find and sort of plan your strategy as to getting to more loot and more weapons, but most of the game really isn't built around the inventory system. I found that pretty quickly within a game, as long as you survive early on, you'll come away with some decent weapons that you can easily take into endgame. Basically, there was only a few times I made it to endgame where I felt like my opponents might have superior weapons to mine, and that might actually affect the outcome of the game. For the most part, it felt like I was really just focusing on the combat as opposed to the looting mechanics, and because of the pacing of the circle, I think the devs really spent a lot of time with the pacing of this game trying to make it feel right. You're not just spending a huge amount of time camping and waiting to find other players. You're almost always on the move. The circle's moving quickly. There's not a lot of time in between circles, and so it just keeps you moving around and engaging other players, forcing you to move between cover quite frequently. Already, some of the base design mechanics of this game tells me that the developers really understand the importance of the circle and how it functions. The actual speed of it is never fast enough so that it's actually catching up to me on foot. It also has a lot of nice audio cues. As the plasma field gets closer to you, it makes a loud sound, so you should never really be surprised to turn around and find the field right behind you. It's nice because it basically serves the exact function that it should, and that it will keep you moving. It'll force you out of cover at times, but generally you shouldn't be dying to the circle unless you're trying something cheeky like running outside of it, taking damage to try and flank up on somebody else. In addition to which, it's also incredibly hard to see when you're outside of the plasma field. So essentially, the developers have fixed basically everything I don't like about the circle in PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, so I'm really excited that the developers seem to understand some of the basic flaws with some of the other Battle Royale game mechanics, and they seem to be addressing them right away with this game. All that being said, there are some aspects of the game that I'm not totally in love with. I think the art design is probably one of the weaker areas of the game, and that's unfortunately just what happens when you have a game that has a $40,000 budget. I think they raised about $50,000 on Kickstarter, and so you're not going to be able to pull in like the most talented art team ever. The game does look a little bit cheesy. It looks maybe like what somebody in the 80s would think a cool futuristic shooter would look like. And the game is actually trying to incorporate a storyline, but I feel like they've made it a bit more complicated than it needs to be. I'll just play the storyline clip for you so you can sort of see what I'm talking about.
The Nyne are a distant and advanced alien civilization that entertains themselves with a pastime held above all others. This massive-scale, gladiator-style blood sport, where you, the player, are chosen from Earth to compete in. The arenas are orbiting fragments of a once unbroken planet, scattered throughout their solar system and transformed into murderous domes known only as the Islands of Nyne.
So if you're wondering what the title of the game actually means, there you go. It's 9 fragments of an alien world and whatever. It's just an excuse to get us in this Battle Royale arena with medieval structures and whatnot. It's kind of weird. We've got like Aztec structures, medieval structures, Roman architecture, huts and whatnot, all while using modern Earth weaponry with Mark 18 assault rifles, Deagle handguns, modern shotguns and sniper rifles. It all feels a little bit out of place, but overall the pacing and the game design behind these sort of weird artistic choices and storyline choices is still pretty good, and I'm excited to see what the developers can come up with as they refine and implement new features in this game. Definitely has a bit of a ways to go. It's not as polished as something like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds right now, but then again, it hasn't really been around quite as long, and I think their budget and dev team is a bit smaller. But overall, I think a lot of their design concepts are stronger than PUBG, and they have a nice emphasis on combat rather than looting, and the pacing is good so that you don't have an incredibly long mid-game of people camping and not really engaging one another. Now, of course, one aspect of Battle Royale games is that you have to get together all the players before you start the server. You can't have people loading into the game late, and instead of just having a stationary or a waiting round before a match where everybody's waiting to load in, they load you into a nice little TDM style arena. It's not the best TDM I've ever played, but it's a good way to warm up and sort of hone in your aim before you start playing the game for real. And so you can also match up against the players that you're going to be facing off in the game once it starts, and it'll give you a little bit of an idea of who some of the dangerous players might be when you actually get out there. So it's just a nice way to warm up and sort of get ready for the real thing, get your aim on point, and I certainly appreciate it. That being said, as far as the TDM arena goes, it's not particularly well designed, and there's so many spawns in which you just spawn in only to get shot in the head immediately by a player just waiting there to shoot you. So the spawn location and the balance of the TDM isn't particularly good. Obviously, it's not the real game mode, so it doesn't count, but I think if you're going to have one TDM game mode pre-round, you may as well spend a little extra time refining it and trying to make it as fun as possible, since it is going to be what everybody plays every time they're waiting to load into a server. Funny enough, one of my favorite things about Islands of Nyne right now is that it's first person only. There's no third person mode, and that really changes up the combat so much for the better, in my opinion. It means that this standard firefight I might engage somebody in a forest where I have a tree for cover, my opponent has a tree for cover, instead of just having one person wait behind their tree and forcing the other player to push them, or setting it up in a situation where the player who has the push pretty much dies every time. Now it becomes much more about skill. I've pushed many players who are hiding behind their cover and won the firefight. It's really more about who can aim, who can snap to the other player quicker, and pushing and being aggressive is much more powerful thanks to getting rid of the third-person peeking mechanic. The system is far superior, in my opinion, to PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds or H1Z1's third-person camera. Granted, PUBG is getting a first-person only mode, but we'll have to see if that actually takes off. Since they built the whole game around third-person mechanics, it feels like first-person might be shoehorned into the game, whereas this one's actually built around first-person mechanics, so I really like that. Also, there aren't a lot of buildings and structures with like second stories and third stories, so building camping isn't as popular. A lot of the loot is outdoors, placed around trees and elsewhere in the environment, so it keeps people moving around, going outdoors, and not just holding up in structures the whole time. From an overall design standpoint, I think the developers are spot on when it comes to pacing and how to design a proper Battle Royale game. I'm really looking forward to watching this game progress, add new features, improve the netcode and performance, and I think we could actually have a really solid Battle Royale game on our hands eventually. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.